Howdy! Here I am today with Shojodoji because I think he's one of the more fun decks in D format right now, and he actually has some unique positioning in the meta. He's an aggro playstyle in a meta that can't really handle aggro really well. He has one of the best ride lines in the D format right now. It has great deck thinning, and despite its aggro playstyle, it has like some higher value turns with it, and it has unique form removal. It kind of helps, kind of doesn't sometimes, and it's able to go second better than other decks. So, without further ado, let's get into the deck list. Let's get into the ride line, which I hyped up so much. So we have the grade 1 and the grade 2, and both of them do the same thing. They both look at the top 5 cards of the deck, then you find 2 stealth units there. If you find 2, you put one of them, the first one that you find, into soul, and then if you find a second one, the grade 1 will bind it, and then the grade 2 will actually call it. This is, if you find 2 stealth units right there, you deck thin 2 immediately on place, each time you do resolve these effects, and these units actually have effects if they hit the bind zone later too. They soul blast 1 and call themselves out. This ride line is just so much value. It's deck thinning, more units on board, set up for the bind zone, and then they just good units, good free units later down the line too. I can't gas up this ride line enough. It's just so nice. So let's get into Shojodoji himself. So, Shojodoji has 2 effects. He can bind stealth units from a soul, exactly 2, can't be less, and you can choose 2 of your opponent's circles, and then you can bind all the cards on those circles. And then they're returned to the hand at the end of the turn, your opponent's hand at the end of the turn. Now, this is removal, but like pseudo removal. Now, there's cards in the deck that can actually bottom deck the things that are in the bind zone, so it can actually be real removal, but it's going back, it's not advantage that you're really minusing your opponent. It's going to go back to the hand at the end of the turn, which if you give them back on place effects that can get more value the more time they're placed, then you're kind of negging yourself, or at least you're giving them even more advantage if you bind the wrong stuff. That's actually one of the more skill testing parts of this deck, is that you have to know what to bind, if binding anything at all. A lot of the times with this first effect, I'm actually not binding anything. I'm just doing it to get the cards from my soul into the bind zone for the setup for the second effect. And so for the second effect, when he attacks the Vanguard, you CB1, you suck up 2 rear guards, and then you choose a stealth unit in your bind zone, and then you can call it to any rear guard circle. And then the actual really nice part about this is that it gains plus 10k if your opponent's on grade 3. One of our better cards in this deck is a grade 3, and because of that plus 10k, you can hit some really annoying numbers immediately on your grade 3 turn if you're going second. And that's why this deck, on top of its deck thinning, its ability to make a board pretty easy, and then the 10k from going second, if your opponent's on grade 3, this deck can really go second just like slightly better than a lot of other decks. Not even slightly better. I think it is generally a good strategy, especially against stride decks. Going second is just really, really nice. And there's just a bunch of cards that help you get that. Some of the grade 2 turns in this deck can just be like really annoying columns to guard early. And D format's not really equipped to handle that early rush. So I think this deck is really good at abusing it right now. So let's get into the core of the deck. We obviously, of course, have 3 Persona rides, not much to say here. I will say that I'm not playing the Chalice in this, because mostly for the fact that we want to see stealth names for the ride line, and then some other things you want to make sure you're actually building a board, and sometimes in really bad case scenarios, you will actually have to put some Persona rides that you see in there, usually when you can see that the writing's on the wall and you don't really have an next turn, so the Persona ride doesn't matter. But notably, I just wanted to up more stealth names, so I'm not playing the Chalice. Then continuing with the deck core, we have the big playmaker of the deck. We have 4 Unprecedented. Now, Unprecedented is a really good card. Unprecedented is a 23k beater by himself, by his effect procs to gain power when 2 or more cards put into your soul, so it would be Shojodoji's effect. And then, when he's placed by a card's ability, if your Vanguard is Tommy or Shojodoji, you soul blast 1 and draw a card. This is the main part of the deck. The deck is trying to loop and resolve Unprecedented at least once per turn, sometimes twice, but you want to be doing it every single turn, so you keep on getting advantage through your drive checks, you draw one for the turn, and then the Unprecedented draw. This is an incredibly important unit for the deck, and you want to make sure it's in rotation somehow. Not exactly even in your hand, because you actually want to prefer to hit this off your ride line or off a Forktail, which we'll get into a second here, and it's better to have it in the soul, so Shojodoji can bind it, so then you can call it out with Shojodoji skills to call it from bind, and then it will get its full effects and you'll be able to proc everything. Now, speaking of calling off the ride line, you can actually call it off the grade 2 because the grade 2 doesn't have a grade restriction. So you can just find this grade 3 off the ride line, and then you can throw it on the guardian circle, the rear guard circle, and then soul blast 1 and draw a card on turn 2. Now, onto the deck core. Now, we have 4 copies of Forktail, and this is now you can technically get away without playing this card. However, this card is just so nice for the deck. It does literally everything that you want. I know she's pretty expensive for what she is, but you can technically play the deck without this card, but she is just so nice for the deck. She does everything. She just boosts the deck up to just the more extremes, like the deck thinning, and then getting the soul, and then just being a grade 1 booster. So it just helps the deck in literally every aspect. So Forktail looks at top 7, it grabs a stealth unit from among them, and then it puts into soul. This is good early, obviously, because you can throw it behind your Vanguard, and then now you're already throwing off enough pressure. The opponent has to eat basically every Vanguard swing because they're not really going to throw down a 15k shield with a 1 to pass. So throwing this out early is really nice. You get that deck thinning early. Basically, these 2 cards, Unprecedented and Forktail, you want to resolve these as much as possible. Now, you want to be careful with deck out with both of these, so you have to be wary of that. But Forktail, resolving Forktail to get more soul, to deck thin even more, to make sure Forktail hits Unprecedents, so Unprecedented can be set up for Shojodoji to be called off from the bind zone, because Unprecedented is the best target from Shojodoji. These two are basically, then obviously combined with the Shojodoji Persona Ride, this is what I would consider the deck core. Everything else is like not super crucial. Obviously, the direct support is good for the deck, but the stealth units, when we get to some of the later ones in my list, mostly just to fill slots, they're really just like, they're just borderline vanillas. But these 2 cards right here, Unprecedented and Forktail, they are just so nice for the deck. Just looping these 2 is just enough to just win games by themselves. As long as you're hitting the dive checks, you're getting enough advantage from Unprecedented, you're hitting good numbers from Unprecedented, and then Forktail's being an annoying booster that's giving you value. So now we're on with the other cards of the deck, and everything from here on out will be a stealth unit, so it'll be hittable off the Rideline and Forktail. Having basically your entire deck, or obviously not the triggers, but all your normal units being stealth unit is kind of important, because you really do want to make sure you hit your Rideline, and then obviously Forktail needs to hit something too. Trust me, I have whiffed on a top 7 check with Forktail sometimes. It is very sad. Anyways, we'll get to the first one here. We have Jakumetsu Arcs. Jakumetsu Arcs is that when he is placed from bind zone, he gains plus 5k. So combined with another card, you can actually make a really easy column. So it'll be 15k by himself. And then the unique effect about him is that when he attacks, you Soul Blast 1, and then you put a card from your opponent's bind zone on the bottom of the deck. So this is how it turns Shojodoji into actual removal. There's another card here, which I'm just about to get into, that also does something similar to this, but for a different cost. But this is how the deck removes. Now, this is not something I generally aim for sometimes. When it comes up, it comes up. There's nothing in the format right now that I'm super like, oh my gosh, I have to get rid of that immediately. Maybe like Yuika if I'm playing against a lyrical deck. But the thing about but having this option to like actually turn Shojodoji into like real removal, like getting rid of cards off their board and that doesn't go back in the hand, is pretty nice. However, Jakumetsu, because Unprecedented is such a good call target off of a Shojodoji skill, Jakumetsu just kind of like falls behind. It's a good first attack before you get into your Vanguard swing to do your effect, but he's just a little bit awkward because how good Unprecedented is. You're almost always going to be wanting to get the draw from Unprecedented. Unprecedented's hitting better numbers by himself, even without the 10k boost from Shojodoji. And then when Unprecedented does, he's hitting like 43k, 43k, 53k. He can just get stupid huge by himself, especially for a 4-attack deck. Now on to the next unit, and that'll be Komen. And Komen is so nice for the deck. He's on place, he counterblasts 1, and then you call a card from your bind zone. Or if your opponent has a card in their bind zone, you can place a card from there onto the bottom of the deck. So the same effect as Jakumetsu Arcs, except it's on place from hand specifically. The other effect to put something in your opponent's bind zone to put on the bottom of the deck, honestly, you're not really doing that much. Sometimes if you have open CB and you have a full board already, you can do that effect and get some free advantage out of it because you just have so much CB because they rushed you down. But Komen will be most of the time calling something out from the bind zone. And on turn 2, if you bind Jakumetsu from the grade 1 skill, because the grade 1 binds and puts something into soul, then you can call it out with Komen, and then you have a 23k column right there because Jakumetsu is actually getting plus 5k because he just got placed on the bind zone. So you can actually make a really nice early column with this, as long as combined with some other cards, you can have a really scary grade 2 turn. Something with the attacks that your opponent can't reasonably block unless they have exactly a 10k shield, which at grade 2, not a lot of people have. But Komen can also call out something from the bind zone that you set up later. It can be an Unprecedented. Now the thing with Komen calling out Unprecedented, you usually want to do this when you have multiple Unprecedents in the bind zone or about to be set up in the bind zone, because like I said, Unprecedented is the best call target off of Shojodoji, so you want to make sure you get it off that, so Unprecedented will be as big as he can, and so you really call Unprecedented off of Komen in your main phase when you actually have more unprecedents to go through for Shojodoji's effect. But that's just another way that Komen can help get some more advantage for you. It'll build a column for you, and then unprecedented will also draw you a card. You can also get something like a Forktail that you set up later in the bind zone. Let's say like a Rideline hit like a Forktail in there, then you can throw it in there, and then you can call it off on the grade 2 turn with Komen. So Forktail can proc again, so you're deck thinning, you're making a column for a counterblast. It's really nice. Komen's probably the best use to counterblast in this deck. In fact, it's the only use to counterblast in this deck, except for exactly Shojodoji. So you basically resolve Shojodoji every turn after grade 3, and then you usually resolve Komen once, maybe twice if you're being pushed in and you're hitting your heals. But there's no counter charge in this deck, so that's why I'm saying you just gotta be, you can't just like see 3 Komens and then activate them all, like as tempting as it is. You just need to make sure that you're doing your Shojodoji every turn. But these 2 units are really nice for direct support for Shojodoji. And because I like Unprecedented so much, we're playing 2 copies of Tsumugi, and Tsumugi is just literally more copies of Unprecedented. When Unprecedented goes to the bind zone from retire effects, or you can ditch them off the Rideline, you can get Tsumugi to throw Unprecedented in the soul. And the soul is actually where Unprecedented wants to be, because if he's Unprecedented's in the soul, if you have one going into your turn in the soul, then Shojodoji will actually be able to put him in the bind zone, and then obviously he's in the bind zone, so Shojodoji can call him there. And like I said, I keep on reiterating it, Unprecedented is the best thing to call off of Shojodoji's second skill. So now we're on to basically the filler units. You just want more stealth names in this deck, and some of them are just almost borderline vanillas at some point, but I try to make do with the best I can. I'll go into some more stealth units later that can actually make a difference. But for right now, I'm playing 2 Shakugan. Shakugan just says, if your opponent's on grade 3, it gains plus 5k. It's literally just a 15k attacker. Now, this is really nice because, like I said, going second with this deck can be really nice because you can hit some annoying numbers really early. But also because you have all your grade 1s are basically Komen, 8k, Forktail, 8k, getting a free grade 1 from the Rideline that's in the bind, so he soul blasts them out for free. That's also 8k, so then you'll be hitting 23 with this guy, or on Persona Ride turn, you'll be hitting 33, which is a really, really nice number to hit. So him hitting, he's just here because 1, he's a stealth name, and then 2, he just hits a little bit better numbers. Oh yeah, something about the Rideline while I'm here, because both of these can be called out for a Soul Blast, you kind of want to, similar to Unprecedented, you kind of want to make sure you're looping these 2, so you just always make sure you know you have a unit. So like, usually what I bind for Shojodoji's skill is I'll bind an Unprecedented and then one of these units because I want to make sure I'm able to build a nice board. Like I'm able to, usually this would be the one that I'll get, well I mean it will depend on what I have. So if I have a booster like Forktail that's just like kind of there vibing and I need to make a column, then I'll call the grade 2 out and I'll bind that one. But if I have an attacker there like Shakugan, then I'll throw this out behind Shakugan, and then these 2, the ones that I call up, whenever I call these to a column, it'll usually be the column that these 2 are in, or one of these 2 are in, to actually get sucked up by Shojodoji, so I can keep on using them throughout the game. And then we have 3 copies of Madoka. I just really like Madoka. He just more copies of stealth units, and then he's just a really good generic Dragon Empire card. Him just being a stealth unit is just a bonus. I just love him so much. He's a 10k attacker, so speeder. 10k booster is also extremely nice against under Unprecedented, because Unprecedented's now hitting even better numbers. And then he's just 15k shield, so he's just more shield value. This is honestly just like what I was more comfortable with it because I was more defensive player, so being able to just grab more cards and with more shield value is really nice. Again, he just happens to be a stealth unit, and he's one of the better stealth units in Dragon Empire generics, so we're playing him. And that's actually it for the main deck. My trigger lineup is actually a little weirder than normal. I'm doing 3 copies of fronts, then I'm doing 3 draws, and I'm actually doing 5 crit triggers. So the reason for this is that Shojodoji actually synergizes really well with every single trigger. The front triggers are really nice because 20k shields are really nice this format, and then you're doing 4 attacks and you're doing the Vanguard swing with 2 standing columns, so obviously the front trigger is really nice. The draw trigger is incredibly nice because the deck does need some help on some advantage in some turns, and this is the best trigger to hit besides a heal defensively. And like I said, with the deck, the Rideline and Forktail deck thing so much that you will just be hitting triggers at some point. And so hitting both of these just for more shield value, more pressure is really good. But you are, at the end of the day, you are an aggro deck, so I did up more crits than usual, than the others at least. Obviously, you could just cut the fronts and then just play 8 crit. That's perfectly fine. I just really like fronts as the shield value because, like I said, I think 20k shield is really good right now. And so this is what I'm running. It feels really nice. Just making sure that you have the option of all of the triggers, because like I said, they work really well with each one of these work really well with Shojodoji. So this is what I personally like. And then I'm just running 4 vanilla heals that I'll put down right here. I was testing some effect triggers with this. Come in the set time meta, you actually probably want to play crit effect heals, but that's for another time. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of that. Oh, and then of course we got PG, Blitz Order, and then we got OT. not much to say there. So really quickly, I wanted to go through some better turns for this deck that are actually kind of like shockingly good. So when you're going through the ride line, so we ride the grade 1, and then what you can bind from the grade 1, binding Unprecedented early, or Unprecedented usually wants to be in the soul, but Unprecedented early can be good. Samugi can be good later because Samugi is an on-place effect, so you can get Unprecedents from drop that you get there. Jakumetsu is obviously a really good hit because we'll see what happens in the grade 2 turn. But honestly, Jakumetsu is an okay target for the bind zone. Like I said, Forktail is an okay for the bind zone. And usually Komans are, if you hit Komans there, so let's say you hit a lot of stealth units off your top 5 check, Koman's actually the one that you probably want to keep in the deck because that's one that you actually want to draw. Him and Forktail are probably the ones that you want to keep there, and then these 4 right over here, especially on Precedent, what you want to try to get out of deck as soon and early as possible. So right here on this grade 1, let's say we hit a Jakumetsu right there, so Jakumetsu will go there, and then we'll put on Precedent into Soul from the grade 1 ride. And then when we go into grade 2, we'll top 5 again. Let's say we hit a Shakugan, so we'll put Shakugan into Soul, and then we could say we find a Forktail. So we'll throw a Forktail behind it, and then we'll do top 7 check. We'll deck then even more. Let's throw Samugi in there. So look, we already got a bunch of soul now. We literally doubled our soul, and we also got a free unit on board. We have something in bind. So let's say if we had a Koman in hand from this setup, we counterblast 1. We were on grade 2. We probably have a counterblast. We'll grab Jakumetsu, and then now we have an 18k Vanguard swing, and then we have a 23k column. So and if you just have something random right here too, now you're pushing 3 attacks. This is a lot of pressure on the grade 2 turn. Not a lot of decks can handle it. And then when you're going on to the grade 3 turn, let's say everything's good here. Let's even say the Jakumetsu is gone. Then when you hit the grade 3 turn, what you'll do is that you'll use Shojodoji's first effect. You'll bind units. So right here, I'll always want to bind on Precedent because that's the target that's going to be from Shojodoji for a second skill on the attack. And then so we have Koman back here. So to make a good column, we're actually going to bind the grade 2. It depends on what we have in our hand at the time, but let's say we have literally nothing. We're going to bind the grade 2, then we're going to Soul Blast 1, probably the starter, and then we're going to call out this from bind zone, and then boom, now we just have basically a free column because Shojodoji binded the unit that we were going to grab from there. We had ample soul, so it was literally just a free unit that we got. And then let's say we have another Unprecedented in hand right here. Now, if we did have another Unprecedented in here, we would actually swap it around like this, because it's, like I said, it's really important to loop Unprecedents. So what the pattern here would be, it would be like 21 here. The numbers aren't great right here because, like I said, we want to be looping Unprecedented. So we'll 21 here, and then we'll swing 21 here. We'll do the effect. Shojodoji will suck up both of these. So now we have secured an Unprecedented for next turn. And then this Unprecedented from the bind zone will come out here. He'll be 23. If you're on the grade 2 turn, if you're going second, then he'll be on 33 by himself. And then he'll Soul Blast 1. Probably don't need a Shakugan, and then we'll draw 1 card. And then that's how we're able to like make a pretty decent turn out of like almost nothing. We really had like not many resources committed from our grade 3 hand. Now we committed some stuff on the grade 2 turn, and that stayed obviously, or I said the Jakumetsu left. But just like these free units that you get from the ride line, and then Unprecedented also giving you a card 2 when he's called out, and then the constant deck thinning from Forktail and the ride line, just giving so much value. And then you have so many toolbox things like Samugi getting Unprecedents back. We have Jakumetsu. If we really cared about the removal from Jakumetsu, we could have kept him there. Just really nice grade 3 turn. So let me talk about some other units that you can definitely play, because like I said, you just need stealth units in this deck, and sometimes you can even get away with running like a couple of non-stealth units if you're really feeling a little bit risky, but sometimes they are just that good. But let's go with something that came out. It's just another common from set 9. This is Raja Spear. Or sorry, his name's Raw Spear now, and he mandatory, if your opponent cards as a bind zone on place, you mandatory soul charge 1, and he gains plus 2k, so he's a 10k booster sets attacker for the turn. I find this really annoying. I really do not like mandatory soul charge, especially in a deck that's selectively deck thinning. Because you're selectively deck thinning non-triggers, the odds of you soul charging a trigger because you're soul charging randomly is annoyingly higher than you'd think. And then obviously it leads to you decking out more. I just don't like this card that much. I think it's annoying more than anything. But if you really are having soul trouble in this deck, and also being a 10k booster is really nice. This is a good card. I think with the promo, which I'm not going to talk about yet, but that's something to look forward in the future. I think with the promo, this also might be nicer too. Let's go into Haden Reso. When he's placed by your Vanguard's ability, this gains plus 10k. So if he's placed by Shojodoji's effect on even your opponent's a grade 3, then he'll gain plus 20k, and if you're a Persona Ride, he'll be 39k by himself. That's a really good number. Now, the funny thing about Raden Reso is actually If you call him off the grade 2, that's all by a Vanguard's ability. He will be 19k on grade 2 by himself. So like a theoretical, like really good a grade 2 turn would be Jakumetsu right there, call him bind with Komen, and then Forktail in the back right here. We got 19, 18, and then 23. Imagine this happening and your opponent's still on 8k. This is an insane push in for grade 2. The reason why I'm not playing him is because like I don't really find him better except for exactly that scenario. Yes, he can hit better numbers than Jakumetsu if he's called off of Shojodoji's ability, but like I said, I'm trying to call Unprecedented out of Shojodoji's ability every single time, as much as I can. And then we got Oshikuni. He's 15k attacker, but if your opponent has 2 or less regards, so compared to Shakugan, he will actually be 15k faster than Shakugan. So if you really want to go for more of a rush strategy, like making sure your grade 2 turn is the most annoying as possible, Oshikuni is technically more value earlier. But later in the game, he's probably going to be offline for his plus 5k because he won't. I mean, obviously the opponent will get less regards when you do the opponent's bind effect, but like I said, it's weird because sometimes you don't really want to be binding stuff because they'll get value off of it. And then I got 2 more stealth units that you probably shouldn't play. Amatachi Giri. If you have more regards than your opponent, draw a card and then discard a card. You can filter more, everything like that. That's fine. It's not the worst in the world. You know, you can get a better shield value hand. Then Fudomaru, if he hits, you can discard a card and then from your hand and draw a card. So these are just 2 ways to filter, grade 1, grade 2. This one has to hit, which sucks. I just thought I'd bring them up. If you really want to filter more, if you really think your hands like are getting really bad with this deck, then you do technically have an option to make the hand just a little bit better. And this is actually an option I've been thinking about. Blaze Maiden Sonya. When Sonya is placed, and if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can Soul Blast 1, and she gets 10k for the turn. So I already showed you how much soul you can actually get with this deck if everything's going right, and you don't really need, as long as you're not completely wild with your soul, you do have some access soul left. So this access soul that you have, you can actually use it for Sonya to be a 20k beater by herself. So that means on your first grade 3 turn, because your opponent doesn't even need to be on grade 3 to do it, on your first grade 3 turn always, you can place her down. She's a 23k attacker, and then you can just get like the Rideline grade 1, throw it behind it. This is a 28k column by itself. On Persona Ride, it's a 38k column, and then you just suck it up for plus 10k until end of turn doesn't even matter because you just suck up this column with Shojodoji anyways. I think that, no, it's not a stealth unit, which is obviously bad, but I think this card actually has a lot of potential. Just being a grade 2 that's a 20k beater, like just immediately when it's on place, like it gets value immediately when it's placed, and then you just suck it up with Shojodoji. It's really nice. I might try this out more. Yeah, like 2 copies because, like I said, you want to be running stealth units more than anything. So I actually want to bring to your attention these cards specifically. So I have the Rideline right here. I have Forktail, Unprecedented, Shakugan, and Komen. The reason why I'm bringing up these cards is because actually the promo that we still don't have yet, Megalonozuchi, actually uses all of these cards in it and uses Shojodoji Rideline, and it's basically an alternate way to play Shojodoji. You just switch out the Vanguard, and it's been performing a lot better than Shojodoji, and it's a really scary deck when it goes all the way through. And these are the cards that you actually use for it. Like obviously these are 4-ofs that you're playing. Shakugan is actually usually played more as a 4-of there because it being a 15k vanilla or 15k beater is really nice in that deck because it multi-attacks so much. You just want some more random free units. But these are cards that are actually can pivot its way into the Megalonozuchi strategy. So if you buy Shojodoji or if you just get it from somewhere, then you can actually transition this deck into a arguably much better deck with Megalonozuchi, the promo that people are theorizing coming out for the set 10 promo. So if you get into this deck, you will have a second deck because you just use all the cards from Shojodoji in Megalonozuchi. So if you get into this deck, you get 2 decks. But that's all I really want to say about the deck. I think this deck's really cool. It's actually one of the most fun decks I've been playing in T format right now. Like I said, the figuring out what to bind and then figuring out like how to like make the most value of your turn, like figuring out how to make a board really easily and figuring out what to bind, what to get from your Rideline, what they get from a Forktail, and then the deck thinning just feels so nice with this deck. I'm just really liking Shojodoji. I hope that he gets better support in the future. I know the promo that works with Tamayura, and I don't know if it works with Megalonozuchi that much, but I know that promo is going to be really nice for Shojodoji. So The deck's really cheap, especially if you cut Forktail. Like I said, Forktail's really good, but she's technically not completely necessary. But if you do have Forktails on you already, and because Forktail's just a really good card, she even has premium application. But if you do have Forktails, just pick up the deck. It's a really good time. You'll be surprised at how much intricate things you have to figure out. And also make sure to tell your opponent to remember to put the cards in the bind zone back into their hand at the end of the turn. Every time I play this deck, everybody's forgotten. It's really annoying, but it is what it is. But anyways, that's Shojodoji. He's one of my favorite decks right now, and I hope you give him a try.